And we are here live at DigiMarcon San Francisco, Texpo San Francisco. I'm here with a very special guest, Angela Aramia. And she is quite fascinating to talk to. In fact, she's very analytical. She's worked a lot with search engines and AI. So I'd love to turn the floor over to her. You could talk a little about your history and why you're so passionate about understanding artificial intelligence in this era, and also how to help those of us who are maybe a little bit more laymen not be afraid of these new technologies that are coming out.
Thank you, Jed. Oh my goodness, it's such an honor to be at MarCon DigiCon. I am so excited to be here. I've worked in the industry for over 10 years, and I really got started 10 years ago on e-commerce search. Back when Disney's Frozen took a big wrench and threw it into search engines and really made them not work for a while. Because if you were searching for Frozen on Kmart, for example, you'd end up with frozen carrots, frozen peas, and frozen patties, and not also Anna and Olaf. So we really had to bring in a lot of AI expertise into search engines and make them work a lot better.
So that's where, as a business mind, we're already thinking, okay, like understanding how search engines and AI have evolved over time to be able to better promote the target audience that you want. And also for those of us that are end users, not be totally frustrated. Like, you know, I'm looking for lemons, not a picture of a lemon or like a fake lemon or whatever. You know? So I'd like to talk a little more about that and how the search engines have evolved over time and your role in that and analyzing the data, what that looked like for you. And was it more like a bottom-up or a top-down approach when you're sort of training these AI models on what it should be in terms of the context of what it's searching for?
Thank you. I love that question. I really got my start in Silicon Valley as an e-commerce search analyst because I knew a lot about regression. I got my degree in economics, and that's essentially all that I studied for a really long time. And that's what search engines were back in the day. Before they got a lot of improvements with artificial intelligence, that's what I did, is analyze search results, understand where they were going wrong, where there were outliers, where there was misinterpretation of the data. And I worked a lot with folks from Kmart, from Staples, from Neiman Marcus, and understanding the different kinds of search and the various types of avenues that you can search for, say, clothing online, like a green dress versus something like a sleeper, and how we have different attributes online and different metadata that can describe all those different products. And it's absolutely fascinating to be here during this time because we're 4 months away from Black Friday, and you really get this point where you have all your merchandise ready, you have room in the summer to take a breather, but not too much because you have to get all your digital content up and running before Black Friday kicks in 4 months, and you want to make the most of it. So just being here and being able to present and provide people with fresh strategies to attract customers for Black Friday 2025, when we're really thinking about what is the consumer spending and how can we open up their wallet a little bit more because it's 2025 and consumer sentiment is low compared to what it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago.
That's really great analysis and makes a lot of us rethink about our searches, right? Because a lot of people just type in the search and then they assume that they're going to get what they're looking for, but nobody really understands the science. That as a lay person, really like put your brain behind what the search engine is considering when it's seeing terms. You could have 3 people all typing in. I keep going back to lemons for some reason. You can have completely different
lemonade.
Things. Yeah, right. Where you're going to get someone's going to get lemonade, someone's going to get lemons, and someone's going to get like a lemon color of something. It's like, how does it know exactly what you're looking for? It's really interesting stuff to think about. So I'd like to talk a little about how you got started with GLG and what your job is kind of entailing with them right now and how they're putting this incredible analytic mind of yours to use over there.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. I got started with GLG because I wanted to make use of the 10 years of experience that I had so far. And I get a lot of different assignments, mostly in the data center space, because I've also seen the flip side of e-commerce, which is the buildup of data centers such that on Black Friday you have very smooth shopping experience, and that starts in January. In January, the folks at Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure are really on their mark to get all the machines that are needed by November into the data center. So there's a lot of buildup that goes on into making sure that Black Friday is smooth and easy, and a lot of folks want to know about what happens, and they get informed through places like GLG, and they sign up to have an hour consultation. It goes by very quickly. They have great questions.
That's great. So a lot of e-commerce brands need to understand this, the technology and where it's headed. Could you help? When you first approached me today, I was really struck because you were excited about AI and you wanted to help people understand more about AI. In fact, you're even talking about a book that you really like. How would you define AI, and what is it that I guess compels you to want to help people understand more about what it is and the way it functions, and just let's say disperse with some of the misconceptions around AI?
Yes. I think artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to be as approachable as taking the slope of a line. And most of us learn that in school, very, very early in school. And I think artificial intelligence concepts are going to be added to education and classes fairly early on to make AI more accessible and more approachable. I think a lot these days is swept under the rug of this very scary boogeyman of it's going to take over jobs. And the reality is that if you want to work and you want to work hard, there will always be a job for you, whether you make your own business or you find someone to work for. And there will always be people that are willing to help you to get ahead in life. That's the belief I have, and one that I think is wholeheartedly in the place of California.
And so, given that, how do you define AI, just loosely?
For me, AI is rather a system of equations. So I have in mind a network, a neural network, and the system of equations that happen from the data set that you start out with to the data set that you end up with. So I take a fairly analytical approach to that description.
I actually really like that, though, because I used to build computers and stuff when I was like 5 years old. So I have a little bit of analytics, even though I'm also very artsy, director and all these things. So I'm fascinated by that and trying to understand how AI computing is so different from the way linear computers with binary instructions were used, where when you gave it an input, you always got the same output. And now you're getting to the point where you've got such a large sample size, you could do the same exact input so many times before you have repetition.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about how AI has addressed the problem of pseudo-randomness in computers and what that looks like, I guess, from a data analytics perspective?
I think that might be more in your wheelhouse. Now that you asked that question, how would you answer that?
All right, well, I could take a stab at that one. So computers, for those of you that don't traditionally know, with binary computing especially, in theory, computers can never be truly random, ever. So you give it an input, you always expect the same output at a certain level. Now, there's ways they inject randomness by having a mathematical computation that'll be run from, let's say, what time of day it is down to the nanosecond, or they'll calculate a quantum fluctuation and they'll use like an API that pulls from that actual real-world quantum vacuum, calculator, and it'll inject a random number. But in theory, computers on their own, without any sort of human or like scientific instrument that's able to measure something truly random, are not random. So what's fascinating to me about AI is it's been able to finally break the barrier with such a large sample size, because traditionally, if you tell a computer, okay, make an image of a lemon, it's going to be the same stinking lemon every single time. But now with AI, it can get very, very creative with it, and you can get all kinds of interesting things. You can tell it, no, I want it purple, and I want it with leaves, and you can run the same prompt like 800 times and get all these iterations. And there's three main ways that they're able to shift the data to give you different output. One of them is by random, pseudo-random, but pseudo-random selection of the sample size. So when it's referencing sample images, if you only have 5 samples to reference, you're going to get the same output. It's just going to pull from those 5 in some different way, like a puzzle with only 5 puzzle pieces, But when you've got millions of pieces, now it can reassemble them in many different ways, so it has the illusion of having different outputs, even though it's just still a limited sample size, but it's such a large size. But another thing it will do is it will limit itself, and it won't pull from the whole sample database. So it'll pull from just a fraction of the database, and it will change which fraction of the database it's pulling from. So like with Suno AI, when you're generating music, it will pseudo-randomly select, I'm going to pull from these samples and these samples and these samples to generate your output, plus combine it with the input that you've given, which is somewhat random, because by human nature, right? Someone may intuitively describe something differently. So let's say I want an image of a girl in a red dress. walking down a golden staircase, the way I describe that might be different than the way someone else may describe it, and that will change the output. So what I want to understand, because this is the way the AI is generating, and I understand that more than your end of it, which is like how the AI is able to understand what humans really intuitively want. How does an AI, given the massive sample set, understand context?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's fascinating from an e-commerce perspective, because as a marketer, you really try to think in the shoes of your consumer. How are they going to describe this product that I acquired in my inventory in March? And you really have to think ahead of that and train your AI model during this time, during the lull that you have in July through November, and get ready for how your consumer is going to search for the red dress. Because it's not just a red dress, it's a red dress with a specific cut, with a specific neckline, with specific type of texture. And all those attributes come into play, and you have to essentially beef up a lot of the data that comes into your inventory, because it might just be red dress, it might just be chiffon dress, it might just be a décolleté dress. And a lot of that is now also going to be automated with ways of different descriptors being put into the AI system.
So that's very helpful and helps me understand a little bit more. So what are some of the clues for context, and how does that relate to the search engine side? So understand one of the clues could be their location. Like, where are they located, right? So that they're finding products close to them. But that's not always, some people want to ship it, and they want the best product, not always what's closest to them. So what are some other indicators and data pieces that it's able to use to sort of intuitively guess? Can it use search history, for example? Like maybe with Google, let's say it recognizes over the course of several months you've spent a lot of time searching for musicals. It might be able to say, okay, they typed in a name of something, it could be an object, but it may more likely be a musical because they've been searching this whole history. Or you could give a specific example, say red shoes. How does the AI know more context about the user, like, oh, maybe this is a female user and they want like red dress shoes versus like a man, oh, he wants like red sneakers or something. You know what I mean? Yeah, if you could break that down a little bit, it'd be interesting.
I think one of the things I want to talk about, because you asked about the signal specifically, is one of the signals that's very important is how green is the delivery going to be. And you see this done on a few different merchants. Amazon obviously does this. You can choose a different delivery date. But that comes towards the end. It doesn't show up in the search results as far as I know. But there are other merchants, for example, ThredUp, which is a secondhand store online and in the App Store, which provides options for choosing only a certain number of items to be included and delivered to you the most green way. And I think one of the reasons why it's really important to talk about recycling and very green shipping during the Black Friday season of 2025 is we're almost at the 60-year mark of when recycling became huge in the 70s. And there's this rule of thumb that it takes about 3 generations to forget something. So it's really like we're getting close. It hasn't been 60 years yet. It's been about 63 years since Rachel Carson just published her DDT book, Silent Spring, which talked about pesticides. So that organic buying has had a bit more staying power than recycling. But if you look around, you'll find examples of where folks might be doing a little bit less recycling than they would have in the 70s when there was a huge popularity boom about being green and recycling and being most efficient with your items.
So is AI smart enough to know if someone's search history is they do a lot of eco and green, that when they type for something, that's something to be interested in when they're searching?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If it's of importance to you, then most likely the merchants that you're being recommended for Black Friday when you shop for your items for Christmas and other holidays, then those should be recommended, and the merchants themselves should have some sort of environmentally friendly background within their blog posts and their social media and their online footprint.
That's really great. I know that's very popular too up here in San Francisco in the Bay,
Yes.
keeping things clean and nice and not having trash everywhere and
Yes.
reusing things where possible. Yeah, the power of like secondhand merchandise is a strong one. I know that a lot of big brands too, like Amazon, they even have warehouses where stuff gets returned. They'll resell it and reuse it, so it's not just getting wasted and winding up in a landfill somewhere.
Yes.
So that's really powerful. Are there any other indicators, and like maybe you can even say like the benchmark of AI evolution, like where you see us going, like as smart as AI is now, where you see it going in the next like 2 years or 3 years? Because if we roll back the tape like 5-10 years ago, yeah, if you're typing in red, you're going to get all kinds of weird stuff. You don't know what you're going to get. You're going to get paint and whatever. But now it seems to be more and more, it's starting to understand what you want. You even get something very specific because you're talking about recycling, right? I remember back in the day when I would search for something, like if you wanted like an eco-friendly, let's say you've got pets, right? And you want like an eco-friendly something for your pet. It may not understand even that that's really what you want. It's just giving you like recycling centers near you. And like, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I asked for. But now it's actually showing you what you want. I know part of that's market led, because if you get shorter clicks to where you actually want to go, it's financial motivation for people to wind up with where they want. But how do you see this shaping the AI search engines of the future?
I'll answer that directly. So I'm definitely not the person to talk about benchmarks. So I'll leave that to a better expert. I will talk about what I see in the future over the next couple of years for AI models and AI hardware specifically, is paying a lot more attention to the power throughput and the use case for the hardware that goes inside the data centers. So it takes a lot of power to power these devices that make essentially octopods of data centers within a lot of hardware. So I think the recycling of that aspect is also very important, because many of the decisions that are done for the software part of a model are separate than the folks that are building the data center. So you'd have, for example, this was a decision a while ago, and I know that ChatGPT and OpenAI are now opening up relationships with Google to run their models, but before that they were running on Azure with Microsoft. So Microsoft's making a decision of how much hardware they should put in data centers that OpenAI and other companies like them will use for training their models. And those two decisions are separate, right? The models are being built separate then from the data centers being built. Mm-hmm. And the life cycle of the hardware themselves is usually around 8 years or so. But depending on how much throughput they get and how hard they're being used, that can be reduced a lot. So there's a mentality there to be chosen of, is it all going to be photos? Is it all going to be text? Like, how hard are we running these devices? How hard are we running these compute units? And can something be done such that you can extend the lifetime? That way they don't end up in landfills prematurely.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. In fact, on one of my earlier podcasts, we actually interviewed someone who's designing AI in the world of agriculture to be able to pick fruit at its most optimal time, so it lasts longer and have like all these extra benefits to it, and then to be able to take food that otherwise maybe not would have gone out and be able to still use it and make it edible. So there's a lot with that. It's really powerful. I guess I'd like to talk a little bit more about just a little bit more about what you do, because I see you're really passionate about this. And so it's great if you talk a little bit more about just what excites you about this world of AI and how you're using it in your job, and like some of your special talents that you're using today, and how people can find you online. And then we'll get into just a little bit of some fun facts about you. So.
Okay, great. So in my day-to-day job, I use artificial intelligence and machine learning to make sure that everything is perceived correctly by my audience. So I create a lot of documents, a lot of slides, and all of that is now, at least in part, being helped by AI to make sure that it is at the proper level of readership for my audience. I'm very, very passionate about your rights. I've spent so much time in artificial intelligence and machine learning that it's really just coming to fruition that I get to speak to a lot more people about it and get to make people feel a little bit better about it. I get a lot of people that seem somewhat fearful about artificial intelligence and machine learning and that it's taking away jobs. And some of that is true and some of that is not true, because most of the job decisions are being done by people. And we need to arm people with different perspectives for them to make more open-minded decisions, more growth-powered decisions. That way we have a positive spiral up rather than a spiral down. So and having an economics background also makes me passionate about the economy and making sure that things are growing appropriately, which is why I'm really, really happy to be speaking at DigiMarcon, knowing that this is a place to be for making sure that your Black Friday is a success.
That was extremely well-rounded. Excellent. All right, so how can people get in touch with you if they'd love to connect and find out more about what you're up to and more about what your company does?
I am on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter. My last name, Eremia, is how you can find me on LinkedIn. The name is Angela, and you'll see a nice, pretty picture of me there. And the same on X and Twitter.
Very good. Well, it's been a pleasure having you. I know we talked for quite a while, but we covered a lot of good ground there. I just would like to end it on sort of a fun note. So we want to talk a little bit about some of the fun things about you. I noticed we talked a little bit about you volunteered with the Philharmonic. If you want to talk a little bit about that, and then just some of your hobbies and things you're interested in, just to keep it like personal, so you understand that even though she's extremely smart, she's also a real human right here. You know, she's not an AI, at least not as far as I know.
Definitely not an AI, although at some point we'll have those discussions. Is that an AI or is that not an AI, as we do today about content? I did volunteer with the Palo Alto Philharmonic. I like to give back to my community, so I do a fair bit of volunteering, also with a garden close to where I live. I also like to watch comedic improv. You can see me at comedy shows every once in a while in San Jose, and attending improv shows at Stanford.
Very good. Well, you've heard it from Angela Eremia. What a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Definitely look up her stuff online and connect. And I just think she's got such a fascinating mind here. It's really interesting to be with someone who has a different understanding of AI.